Hi, I'm Carrie Deaver-Boaz, head coach at the University of Arkansas. Hitters, pitchers, and their coaches don't agree on much. But the one fact that they do agree on, and I don't believe that it will change very often or in the near future, is a hitter, in order for them to be successful, has to identify the location of where to hit the ball. That's not in location on the field. It's identifying, is it high, is it low, is it inside, or is it outside? The next factor that they have to identify is when are they going to hit it in order of speed versus the changeup or any off speed of the pitches that we're going to teach today. In order for them to do that, they have to identify both of those. What I'm going to teach you today is how we are going to go to battle as a pitcher and catcher and help them not find that success. It is my philosophy that a hitter is already set up to be a failure. Many coaches, and especially hitting coaches, won't agree with me. But I say that if a batter faces me 10 times and they're a good batter, they're hitting 300 to 400. That means out of those 10 times, they've already failed 6 to 7 times. Constantly, I'm asked, what's the hardest pitch to hit? Is it a rise ball? Is it a drop ball? Is it a curve ball, screwball, knuckleball, or any variation of those pitches? And what I'm here to tell you is it's not one specific pitch. It's the pitch that changes planes. A pitch that changes planes is one that changes it vertically, up and down. That is the hardest because they have to identify at what point they are going to make contact and when they're going to make that, using a round object, a bat, to hit a round object, the ball. Therefore, as a pitcher, if I can take advantage of the biggest weakness most hitters have, their vision, and adjust a pitch a half inch to even an inch off, I'm going to be more successful and maybe get them to be failures 7 to 8 times. There are some general principles that I want to get right out in the open before we go any farther. First one that I want to talk to you about is lots of times you will hear there is one way to do a rise ball, a drop ball, a curve ball, or whatever pitch you're choosing to learn. As a matter of fact, in anything that you're learning in softball, a lot of times I will hear a coach or a father or somebody working with a young lady saying, this is the way you have to do it. First thing that I want to say is there's a lot of denominators or factors out there for us that make that a very untrue statement. Size of your hands, your height, your legs, all that kind of stuff will make a difference in what you have to do in order for you to find the most success. What I'm going to show you is what has worked for me and has worked for hundreds of girls that I have worked with. But taking that one step farther, the thing that you have to realize is there are lots of different grips out there for a rise ball, lots of different grips out there for a drop ball. Depending on who you talk to is the one that they like to teach. I am not going to stand in front of you today and tell you that my rise ball grip is the best one that's out there and that the only one that you should choose. What I am going to tell you is it's the one that has maximized the most rotation for me in pitching. Why do I bring up rotation at this point? The only thing that makes the ball move is rotation. It does not matter if I hold a rise ball grip, I can still make that ball drop based on what I do with my wrist snap, and wrist snap is what gives the ball rotation. All the different grips that people teach should be ones that use to maximize the rotation of the ball, because the rotation is what actually gives you the movement. So with those two things out, what I'd like to do is break and go right into the rise ball and start with the grip. All right, first things first. When we're starting to look at learning a new pitch, we have to break it down in several segments to show you what's the most important thing to learn or the process in which to do that. Looking at a rise ball, we're trying to get an object to go from point A to point B in about a 40 to 43 foot basis between the pitcher and the catcher. In order to do that, the first thing that we're going to talk about that affects that is the grip. There's several different grips out there like that I've said to you. The first one that I've learned, or the one that I've actually learned over the years that I've adapted to me, is I take my ring finger, place it right there on the seam, the slimmer part of the seam there. My middle finger, I place it right there so that I've got the grip on the seams. I take my index or my pointer finger and I curl it right up on the side. Different variations, people will curl it all the way up to the side. I was more comfortable on the side. My thumb comes right down here on the seam if it can reach. It splits right between those two fingers. Most importantly, notice that I still have my air pocket and that ball is not tucked all the way back in there so that I minimize my wrist rotation. There it is right there. Now this pinky here can be tucked all the way down there if that's how you choose. It's really there just for comfort and for balance. So that's the grip that I use. Now the pressure is all applied on this finger right here, and it should be to where you cannot move that finger. I'm not white knuckling or gripping it in through here. It's right there on that finger. Another variation of that grip, and especially if your finger gets sore after a few because you're putting so much pressure, you can just go ahead and put that finger right up there by that middle finger so that you're working on wrist snap and you still are using the same grip. You're just not getting the pressure or hurting your finger until you build up that callus. Okay, another grip is using this horseshoe right here, taking that middle finger, placing it right there on that seam. The thumb comes right down to that seam so that those two are on the seams, and this index finger curls right there on the side. Okay, those two are the ones that are there. The pressure is still there. Another grip that you'll often see is one that just puts them right there, and they're working on getting through that doorknob with that wrist rotation. Always the same thing with it, not back into the palm of the hand, but with an air pocket that you can use to maximize your wrist snap. Now, like I said, the reason that I ended up tucking my finger as I was playing with my rise ball and learning from different pitching coaches is it gave me one or two more rotations, therefore possibly that 1/4 of an inch movement in the ball that you might need to throw that batter off to be successful. There are several different grips there that you can play with, and the most important thing is I challenge you is to find a grip possibly that I've never seen or you can invent yourself that works the best. If your ball is rising, it's because your wrist snap is correct and you found a grip that works for you. Most importantly, you've got to find your pitcher or yourself to see what's comfortable in the hand. You can hold it like this and get great rotation on it, but if you don't feel like you've got a good grip on the ball or you're losing the ball, it defeats the purpose because you won't get that extra rotation anyways. Now let's cover the wrist snap. I think most pitching coaches will agree that this is the place that needs to be spent the most time on. And that's because we've already said or already have agreed on that wrist snap is what gives you rotation, and rotation is what gives you movement. Movement is what gives you success against the batters. Now, with the wrist snap, and I have my grip that I'm the most comfortable with and that I'd like to ask you to work and play with to see if you can experience the same success with it as I did, is I'm right here. I talked just briefly about it being a doorknob. If I walked up to that doorknob and I was trying to get through that door or walk through that door, I would be turning it and pulling the door open to be able to walk through that door. Now, the thing that I'm going to tell you, notice when I turned it and I'm pulling that ball or pulling the door, I'm not wanting the pulling action. I'm just using the wrist snap of the doorknob to be able to get it. That's a drill that I normally have my girls do, is just stand in front of a door, use the doorknob, and just open it, open it, open it. You'll notice if you take a ball and do this, or you go to a doorknob and do it, once you've maximized your wrist snap as far as it goes, by leading with that pinky coming through, going to that doorknob, leading with that pinky, throwing your thumb to the ground, your arm can only go so far, physically possible. If it goes any farther, I'm dipping with my shoulder. So my wrist snap is leading with my pinky and throwing my thumb to the ground. That's my wrist snap right through there, as if it was a doorknob going right through it. The thing that you need to understand is if you are throwing it short and you're new at this, or long and new at this, if you are doing it correctly, you are going to start to experience some tightening of the muscles through here, maybe a little burning action. Don't panic, don't be nervous. That's really good feedback. You know you're doing something right. Therefore, on the other hand, if you're feeling anything in your elbow, we're not doing something right. So make sure that once you see this is a good area to feel a little tightness. It's the same thing as if you were lifting weights, you're going to experience some fatigue in there. Okay, just like I pointed out on the finger. Don't panic, it's just in learning the whole process. So here's your wrist snap, you take it, you're walking right through that door and you're snapping it all the way through. Now this is just the wrist snap out in front to show you what it will look like. Later on we'll go back to the location of exactly where it should happen or occur in the pitch to be able to get that rise ball to go through the strike zone. All right, remember in the very beginning we talked about getting a rise ball to go from point A to point B. Now remember, we're trying to get this to happen in a 40 to 43 feet based on what your pitching distance is, not only to get it through the strike zone, but to actually tempt the batter to swing at the ball. So those are the things that we have to consider. In talking about getting that ball to go from point A to point B in that short of a distance, the first thing that we're going to discuss that will affect that is your stride, what you do with your stride. Now, if you haven't seen it in my tape, Teaching Beginning Pitchers video, let me review it for you very quickly so that you understand and aren't completely at loss when I talk about the power line. The power line will come directly off the inside right portion of my foot because I'm right-handed and this is my push-off leg. If you're left-handed, obviously it's going to be the exact opposite. And it's going to extend out there about 5-6 feet so that I can actually see as my push-off foot I start, and when I'm driving out with my leg, that my left leg or my plant foot is going to land on that power line. So that if I showed you and I drove out, I'd be right here and I could draw that power line right through my feet all the way back into there. And that's what I consider on a power line. Now, talking about point A to point B, we're not going to do anything to adjust off our power line. What we are going to do is lengthen our stride or take a longer stride. Now, a lot of problems can occur when we first start talking about doing this, because when we talk to young ladies about lengthening their stride, they tend to get really off balance and come right out here to get their balance completely off, and then it won't help for anything else that we're doing with wrist snap. We'll get all off balance and everything will kind of go amok for you. So when we're talking about that power line, nothing changes. You're still on that power line. You are lengthening your stride or getting farther out there. Why do we lengthen our stride? In order to get an object to go from point A to point B in this short amount of distance, what we have to do is get under the ball. Now, the first thing that I do when I talk about getting under the ball is point out very common problem for most pitchers in getting under the ball. When they lengthen that stride, they'll get under the ball. This is what they interpret as under the ball right here. If you really analyze this, I'm on top of the ball right here. Under the ball is by lengthening my stride, bending my knees, and getting under the ball through my wrist snap right through here. So I'm getting under the ball by lengthening my stride. Make sure we're not getting in front of the ball or on top of the ball. We're getting under the ball, and we're doing that by lengthening our stride. Nothing has changed off of our power line. It has just gotten longer. We will come back to throwing a rise ball inside and outside, and that is when we will change off the power line. All right, a real quick review. First, we talked about the grip, fingertip or ring finger, middle finger, curled, thumb down. I've got my air pocket right here. Pressure on my index finger right here to where I can't move it. Remember, if you've got a little bit soreness there and you're trying to master this, put it here, but it's right there curled on the side, and there's my grip. Wrist snap that we talked about, remember that doorknob. Those of you who have got big brothers that chase you, get in front of that door, work on getting through that doorknob. Just remember, when you're practicing that doorknob, if you're opening the door, you're making a pulling action here. We're not wanting any pulling back on that ball. We're just wanting the wrist snap. The thumb's being thrown down to the ground, and that pinky finger is leading the wrist snap to where it cannot go anymore, and you're feeling all of your muscles in your forearm work. Just a little note. A lot of college pitchers that you see that are good rise ball pitchers, if you had them hold up both their arms, they'd have one arm that looked like a Popeye arm and one slender arm here. It's been a long time since I've been throwing collegiate games. I'm now in the coaching side of it, so my arms aren't that different and you really can't notice it. But you will see that difference there. The next thing that we talked about is that we're not coming off that power line at this point in time. We'll discuss that in a moment about inside and outside rise balls. We're staying on that power line, driving out as hard as we can, and planning farther or taking a longer stride than what our normal fastball pitch, or even more opposite than what the drop ball is. So we're taking that longer stride. We did talk a little bit, or I did bring a little bit of the body angle in, but body angle is something that I'll speak to you in great depth about lots of different pitches. That body angle is after we've taken that long stride here, okay, and we've gotten past our normal and we're still on that power line. Our body angle is not on top of, but underneath of the ball, and we're coming with the bending of our knee under the ball with the wrist snap right at that point of release. Now, we haven't even covered the point of release, but I want you to understand, it's my belief that you've got about a 5 to 7 inch box from front to here and about a 5 to 6 inch box right here that you have to accomplish that wrist snap or getting through that door in order to even have a chance to get it into the strike zone. Okay, so you've got that release point right in here that you're going through that doorknob right there by the hip. So we've covered grip, we've covered body angle, we've covered stride, we've covered wrist snap. Now let's put that all together, okay? When we come back, you want to make sure you've got your normal motion, you're nice and easy. Everything is fluid and easy, and you're coming out and snapping up. Once you've covered and put that all together, there's a whole nother avenue that we can start doing, and we can start playing with inside and outside. Remember, we've talked about one thing that hitting and pitching coaches will agree on. The thing for a pitcher or a catcher, or pitcher or hitter to have to do to be successful is to be able to play or identify where the location inside, outside, and when it's coming to you to hit. Now, if I can throw a rise ball that changes planes, that is already going to make it difficult for that hitter, and now throw it inside and outside, I'm taking my game one step farther. In doing that, remember that power line that I've talked to you about. You're right here. The only thing that is going to change, and I'm going to bring this up on a drop ball later, and I bring it up on any pitch that I'm talking about, in order for it to go inside or outside, is where you step on that power line. My simple philosophy is keep it simple. I'm not telling you to throw your hips out or change your wrist snap or change any of that. The only thing we're going to change is our stride foot. So if I'm a right-handed pitcher throwing to a right-handed batter and I'm wanting an outside rise ball, I'm going to step about anywhere from 1 to 3 inches off that original power line and finish everything the same, coming right back through. For every inch I change off my power line in that 40 to 43 foot distance, it's going to bring that ball that much farther out. Remember, home plate 17 inches, and we have to hit the black in order to get a called strike. So by moving that foot off for an outside pitch to here, just off the power line, that'll make the ball for a rise ball go inside. Okay? The outside rise ball, in my opinion, is a harder one to do because you tend to want to throw the body out and use shoulder rotation as opposed to everything the same and just where you plant the foot. Now, obviously, if that's the outside, what am I going to tell you for the inside? If this is my power line, I'm coming 1 to 2 inches right here and throwing an inside rise ball. Everything is the same other than where I step. So that gives you something to work on once you've started to master the rise ball, of bringing it inside and outside. Let's just take it one step farther, and a little secret that made me pretty successful in college using it. What I learned to do is, as I started playing with a rise ball, is I wanted to try to maximize my rotation and even learn how to throw a rise ball that started maybe here and rose to here. Now, remember, we're already talking about getting from point A to point B. To do that, I had to learn how to get even lower without dragging my knuckles on the ground to get that low rise ball to happen. What I'm going to tell you I did, and through instruction from Margie Wright at Fresno State, it was something that we played with. One of those things like I challenge you to come up with maybe your new grip that we started playing with that I experienced a lot of success with. As I stride out and I come as far as I can, staying on balance, what I learned is that I came down through here at my release point. I used my stomach muscles, of which you should do anyways, and I pushed back under the ball. So as I'm driving out, I came and I pushed back to get back under the ball, maximize my rotation, and lower my body. Now, when you first start it, it feels really strange. It took a lot of trial and a lot of error for me to be able to really learn the timing process, because I'm driving out as hard as I can, I'm wrist snapping, and now I'm going up underneath the ball or pushing back under it to maximize that rotation. One thing I want to make really clear, your stomach muscles, if they're not in shape now, if you want to be a good rise ball pitcher, they need to get in shape, and they will become in shape, because on that release and when you're pushing back through here, you're going to feel your stomach muscles pulling or pushing back as if you just finished a back bend that you used to do all the time when you were a young girl. So all that in review, a few extra things for you to work on should get you to that next level and play even more games with the batter, and that's what we want to accomplish. Now it's time to answer a few common questions or help break down and show you a few common problems in mastering that rise ball. Some of the questions that I hear is my ball's not rising, that mostly has to do with a lazy wrist snap. Remember, you want to make sure that it's as far as it can go and that it happens as fast and quickly as possible right there through that release box. So make sure it's a quick, fast wrist snap. Remember, this is a good indication is the forearm if that's happening. Okay, some people will say it's curving. You're probably snapping across, much like we will show in a curve ball or I teach in a curve ball. You want to make sure that snap is leading with that pinky finger up and down. Now, the rise ball's too far out of the strike zone or it's never tempting the batters. You got two things that can be happening is that wrist snap can be way out in front of your release box, or your stride might not be long enough to be able to get under the ball. It might be too short and everything's happening here. And in that 40 to 43 foot process, that's going to affect that pitch a lot of where it will happen. Another thing is body angle, okay? Body angle, I talk about being under the ball. Remember, under the ball is here. I'm feeling my stomach muscles here. I'm here. I am not on top of the ball. Under the ball, real quick little key thing you might talk about with younger pitchers is I make them feel like they want to drag their fingers or their knuckles on the ground to get under it, and they don't want to do it with their arm, they want to do it with their legs. That'll ensure them getting down and under the ball, not on top of the ball. Those are some of the common questions that you'll hear with a rise ball, some of the common concerns, and most of it just comes down to breaking it down in pieces to be able to master it and take that rise ball to the next level. We're going to give you a few drills that I use. They're very common and we use them with almost every pitch, but it helps break down the pitch into wrist snap, body angle to really help accomplish mastering the rise ball. This first drill for the rise ball is a one knee isolated drill. We're doing this essentially just to take the lower half of the body completely out of the picture when the young lady is trying to establish good wrist snap. Once again, we've stated throughout this entire film that wrist snap is what gives rotation and rotation is what gives movement. This is a drill that can be used virtually for any pitch that we've talked about in the rise ball and the drop ball. However, the over-the-top drop, this is a really hard drill to be able to do because they are snapping down and around their leg and they won't see much success with it. Focus on the wrist snap, watch their hands come through, and as fast and as hard as you want, have them not worrying about accuracy and hitting their targets. They're working primarily and solely on wrist snap.
Cut.
This next drill is just another step in developing wrist snap for the rise ball. We've put a football in their hand. Obviously, it's not identical to the wrist snap that you need, but it gives them another object that they try to get to spiral underhand, just like a quarterback does in football overhand. It really works on the wrist snap and the fundamental of leading with that finger to get it to go. Please do not have your pitcher panic if they're not getting the right spiral right in the beginning. It's just another odd-shaped ball that they can work on getting the wrist snap for a rise ball and can see some direct feedback with the correct spiral rotation of the football. This is basically isolating the legs once again. It's gotten their stride much farther out. Remember, with the rise ball, you have a longer stride to get underneath the ball. We're getting them to already have their body angle that we want them to have at the point of release so that they can concentrate on their wrist snap and having their body feel like what it should feel like during that wrist snap. Notice the body angle pulling back and their stomach muscles working. One last thought on rise ball drills. A really good action that you can actually set them up in is have your pitcher and catcher from about the distance of home plate to second base. Have them actually going through the whole motion of watching that snap. It's a good way for the catcher to start getting used to watching the rotation in the ball and actually seeing some movement happen. And it's a good way for the pitcher to start seeing what the ball actually does. Over a longer period that a ball has to travel, the more movement that actually can happen because the rotation has longer to work and it gets them a good idea. You can also use that in the drop ball, curve ball, any kind of pitches that you're trying to learn. Distance is always good for them to watch the rotation and actually see the spin between the pitcher and the catcher. All right, now we've worked on trying to master moving the ball through an upward plane towards that batter to give them one more headache. Now let's give them another one to deal with. Let's work on breaking down and learning the drop ball, or learning to break that downward plane. Remember, the hardest pitch to hit is one that changes plane. Rise ball, now we go to the drop ball. The drop ball, there are so many different grips, different philosophy, and even different types. It's really hard in the drop ball because you've got what we call a peel or a roll back drop, and then you've got an over the top or a snap over drop, depending on what title or what pitching coach you're talking to. Technically, there's two. Okay, first thing we're going to start with is the grip once again. Now, when I first started pitching, I was 8, 9 years old. I had much smaller hands than the huge hands that I have now. So when I first started to pitch, one of the first pitches I learned was the drop ball. The first thing they told me is to get the ball into my fingertips. And what we mean when we talk about fingertips is make sure that your fingertips are on the seam so that you can control it and actually feel it. It's the only part of the ball that has any type of a ridge, if it has some, that you can feel yourself pulling and feeling that rotation or it coming off of the ball. So the first one that I'm going to show you is a horseshoe, if you look at it, or a clown smile, however you want to say it. You're taking it, most importantly, you're wanting it in the fingertips right there on the seam so that you have something on the rise of the ball to feel it actually snap or move off of. You're going to roll it back into those fingertips, keeping it back on the pad of the hand and not back into the air pocket. Taking your thumb down, if you can, put it on the side, not the pad of the thumb, right down there lined up with that middle finger to keep that air pocket in there and to maximize your wrist snap. Once again, that would be a 4 or a 3 finger depending on who you asked how it would be, or you could hold it there. Either way, it wouldn't matter, but that would be your grip for the 4 or 3 finger drop. Now there's other philosophies out there that 2 finger is better because it gets you just into the 2 longest fingers to be able to have it come off of a more even rotation, more downward movement. Same thing, right, with your pads of the fingers right on the seam of the ball or the raise of the ball, rolled back in with these 2 fingers tucked back in and the thumb down in there. Once again, you still have your air pockets even though it's covered up by those 2 fingers being bent in, and it's into the fingertips waiting for the rotation that'll give you the 4-seam rotation that comes down this direction. Now, obviously, I have big enough hands to feel comfortable with that, or should, because the ball wasn't going anywhere. But I can tell you, after throwing with 4 fingers for most of my pitching career, to try to make that change to 2, and I tried over and over and over again, was not something I ever really got comfortable with. I felt continually like I was losing the ball, which then really didn't make any difference whether I would have had a more true drop ball going straight down, because I wasn't comfortable with the grip. So I stuck with a 3 or actually 4. Now, people will say spread your fingers apart. It's what you're comfortable with. And remember, we're working for a rotation of balls off of there. Now, at the same time, there are people that might even come over here where they take this part or a C part of the hand and stick it straight into there, right around that horseshoe to make that peel. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you, the reason that I don't go to here is my thumb is not in a seam, and I don't feel comfortable without having my thumb on something to hold on to that ball with. So you can do it lots of different ways, but the biggest differences I see are with the 2 and 4 finger drop with the peel drop. Now remember, we're going off the peel drop right now. We're not talking about the snap over or the roll over drop, and we will get to that differently with some different grips on that. But that's what we're talking about right there, is on that grip, right in there, air pocket, right through there. All right, now we've covered the grip. Let's go back to the wrist snap. With that 4 finger or 2 finger, whichever one you're using, because you're the comfort zone through there, we got to talk about what the wrist actually does. We're talking about the peel drop, and we'll go to the snap over the rollover drop, and that's where you're going to see the significant difference. But for this peel drop, once again, remember our little release point right in here. We're trying to get this ball released into this point in here on the peel drop. The thing I'm going to tell you with the wrist snap is it's just right here. This is all the action that you're going to see. You're wanting to see that wrist slap up or pull up as fast as possible so that those fingers are pulling off that ball to create that 4-seam rotation headed off after it happens, leaving those fingers. Now, one of the key significant differences in this pitch that's very hard for young players to master right off the bat is lifting of the thumb. When they come in here and they're going to snap, I have them raise their thumb, and it's not just straight off the ball or they lose the ball, but the thumb comes off the ball as they're snapping it so that they're getting a full rotation. If they try to throw it with the thumb, they've actually locked their wrist and they're actually pushing the ball, which is going to severely minimize the rotation, which minimizes the movement. So it's just a lifting slightly of the thumb and a snapping of the fingers if my hand was right here, and it's snapping right through there. Now, this is where I'm going to differ than a lot of pitching coaches that I've dealt with in here. I've heard a lot of people in this wrist snap, when they call it a peel drop or a pull-up drop, that they're telling you to do this and pull up on the ball at the same time. I take that completely out. It's nothing that I've ever had or experienced any success with. I'm not saying it can't work. It's just not something that I've ever seen work or work as accurate or as good as what I can show you. And by doing that, we move right smack into the body angle. That body angle is in the drop ball is huge. Now, I'm the first one going to admit, in pitching or teaching people how to pitch, you have to really work on learning how to find the words that are going to trigger off the response that we want their body to make. When I started pitching, I was really good in driving and getting out there as far as I could to throw the ball as hard as I could. And then all of a sudden, someone threw at me, let's learn the drop ball. And the first thing they said to me was, you have to shorten your stride. In doing that, I would shorten my stride and I'd take my whole motion. If my normal push-off motion was really explosive and really getting out there to throw the ball, and now they told me on this drop ball I had to take my normal stride right here and shorten it, I got to be where I was very compact and I would never really push and ever cover any ground to get that. In playing and experimenting and really watching a lot of pitchers, what I have learned in coaching somebody is we talked about getting their chest over their toes. My father was the one who came up with that for me and said, get your boobs or get your chest over your toes in throwing that to get that body angle. So let me show you what it looks like from the side. I'm still driving as hard as I can, and as I drive as hard as I can out here, and I'm working on getting my chest over my toes. I'm throwing my chest, boom, right over my toes as I come right through here for that peel drop, okay, or the over-the-top drop. That angle is going to be the same, but my chest is over my toes. Notice that this part of my body is fused together. You're not seeing my butt throw backwards or push backwards. It's nice and in here angled, and my chest is over my toes. Okay, or I am on, what I'm going to tell you is get on top of the ball. Here I am on top of the ball, my shoulder's over, everything is over my release snap, and I'm in here. Now, let's think about that. Someone told me to shorten my stride. I would get all compact in here, not be able to do it. Somebody said to me, get your chest over your toes. I would drive as hard as I could, which I wasn't able to master when someone was telling me to shorten my stride, and I'd work on getting my chest over my toes. There's no way I could get my chest over my toes without shortening my stride. And the only reason I make this point to you is it was the exact same body or movement that they were wanting me to get to master or learn how to do to be able to learn the drop ball. But for me, it was just a matter of finding a different word to be able to really make or unmake my body understand what my brain was telling it to do. So you definitely have to shorten your stride, and that's the exact opposite of the rise ball. But let's take that one point A, point B again. In a rise ball, we're going point A to point B, and all we do is flip-flop that now for the drop ball. Point A to point B. Okay, excuse me, point A to point B. Right here, I'm higher and I want it to go lower. I'm wanting a downward break in the plane, making it harder for that batter to hit. So my body angle is over the top with a shorter stride. Okay, so we've covered body angle and stride virtually in that same thing because they really are one and hard to separate. It's your chest or over your toes, which technically shortens your stride, or if shortening your stride works for you, it's the same thing. The one thing I don't want to see you lose is that explosiveness or the push off the ground towards your intended target by shortening your stride. So which either one of those work for you, you're working on your chest over your toes and shortening your stride, and that will get that to go from point A to point B. All right, real quick review. We have the grip, our forefinger or our two finger right there in the side, air pocket in there. Our wrist snap happens within that box right in here. We've got a quick flipping of the wrist with a slight upward movement or a pull off of the thumb right in there to flip the wrist right through there. We are staying once again on our power line. Nothing has changed. We are not trying to at this point throw an inside or an outside drop. We're throwing right on our power line. Our biggest difference in our stride is it is the exact opposite of the rise ball. It is shortened, or our angled of our chest is over the top of our toes, And once again, we're on top of that ball here, not over it, not back on it, but we're on top of that ball through this body angle of this part of the body being fused together. I'm not pushing back, it's fused together, and I'm angled on top of that ball. Now let's put that whole motion right back together. I get my grip, I get myself comfortable, I'm on my power line. As I go through my motion, I come out and my stride is shorter. I'm pushing on top of the ball and I'm a flipping of the wrist right through here with my body angle fused together here, and I'm coming right straight through at you. Notice my arm is not out to the side, it's right nice and easy right through my delivery point in here, and I'm not hitting my body, it's just releasing right through my release point with a quick wrist snap and angled on top of that ball. Now, what I'd like to move directly into is the over the top or the snap over drop, whichever you talk to or whomever you talk to calls it. There's lots of different names for it. Let's just start right back with the grip. Okay, I used the same grip for this pitch as I did for my peel drop. A lot of times people would say that might have limited my rotation because on the snap over the drop is where the snap, you're actually throwing that hand over, and I might not have technically had a true 4 seam snapping over. But when I tried, and most people on a different grip for that snap over the drop, put it right in here, so that my fingertips were up there and my thumb was down here on this seam, I never really felt that comfortable with that pitch, and mostly because it was different. The other thing that we've never even covered in all this video information that I throw to you at this point in time is the simpler that you can keep your grips and the more alike you can keep them to maximize your rotation and your movement, the easier it is when you're standing out on the mound and your catcher's calling your pitches for you to get it in here without having to really fuss or see a lot of different pitching movement or arm strains in your arm. Because remember, the more advanced you get, the better coaches and hitters you face. Offensive coaches are standing over on third base or first base and picking up different things. And if you're not comfortable without looking in there to get that grip or do it, it makes it that much harder. So once again, I kept the same grip. My grip really wasn't that different. It's still very important to have that air pocket in there with your thumb or your fingertips on seams. That's the most important part. Now, this is where I'm going to break it down and get pretty intense with the difference of the pitch between the peel and the roll over, the snap over drop. It's the wrist snap. It is the significant difference and pretty much the only difference in these two different drop balls that we're throwing here. The body angle, the stride, everything else is virtually exactly the same on those two pitches, but not with the wrist snap. The wrist snap is where we start to come into the biggest significant differences. Now, what you see on a wrist snap and on the over-the-top grab or snap, if you actually slow the pitch down, is you're going to see me take my wrist and snap over and right around so that it's coming right here. Now, the more advanced you get, the better that you get at this, and the more you do it, more repetitions that you can get, you will start to master where you're snapping right here on the side. Now, when I'm starting with a beginner pitcher or someone who might be struggling with snapping it over, what I talk to them about is when I'm here, I want you to take this thumb and I want you to throw it or snap it to this leg over here, so that when this snap is happening, you're coming here and you're snapping across your body. The biggest thing that you're going to see young pitchers in doing this is they'll snap with the ball still in their hand and then they'll push. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. As I'm snapping, that ball is coming out of my hands here as I finish my snap. My snap does not happen and then the ball release. It's no different than the rice ball, but it's very difficult for young pitchers and very confusing to say snap over the top when we've always talked about taking everything towards your target. Now you're snapping over and actually snapping back to your body. So it's over the top. Once again, I said I have them throw their thumb here. When they start getting comfortable with that and actually seeing some downward movement and get comfortable with that, take that thumb, tell them to snap it between their legs. As they get better at that, tell them to snap it right into this leg and then boom, right to the side of it. So it's a gradual process, but you can tell them ideally what we're striving for is this. But what I see in these pictures is you tell them to do this, and the first thing they do is when they snap straight down and the ball goes smack down to the ground. Now remember, that release box is right in here, and that snap is starting to happen and finish before you get out of that release point. So the single difference is I am not snapping this way now. I am snapping down and I am snapping over right through here, right down and around that leg as quick as possible. My body angle is no different whatsoever. It's exactly the same. I'm on top of the ball and I'm snapping down across or through the ball right there as it goes down and around in there. That's the biggest difference. Stride is the same, grips can be the same, they can be different, body angle is the same. The only thing that's different is now the wrist snap. This is a confusing and difficult pitch. If you're going to ask me, like most of you are sitting there wondering which one is the best or which one should be taught first, you know, there's lots of different mixed philosophies or views out there. I'm going to tell you, if you have a young lady that throws the ball rather hard, an over-the-top drop would be the immediate pitch that I would go to, because not only are you going to be able to master or get them to get the ball to break a plane, it's also going to take a little speed off of it. And in a 40 or 43 foot distance from the pitching plate to home plate, if you can get a little bit of speed off of that ball to go from point A to point B, you're going to get more chance for more rotation. And now you're also playing with that other factor that even hitting and pitching coaches agree on, is when are they going to hit the ball, the speed of the ball. And with that peel drop, the reason I converted from a peel to the over the top is I threw hard enough that it didn't necessarily have enough time to really break that downward plane as much as it could when I came over the top. So that's the biggest things. Now what I'd like to point out for that over-the-top drop for you is the biggest or the most common problems that I see with that. When you start talking about over-the-top, obviously the first one that I pointed out is when they snap through here, they're actually releasing backwards, which is going to look like a change. They're not going to be able to cover that distance, and it's going to get real frustrating. Another thing that you see is when girls start to learn how to snap here, they start to get a trunk rotation so that they try to do it with their shoulders and not their wrist snap. That's the biggest problem that you're going to see. Is I'm coming here, if I'm doing it with my shoulders, I'm doing this and my hand's actually trailing, and my wrist snap, I'm either ever going to finish it or everything's going to be plugging every right-handed batter in the box, so that you're not going to necessarily get that downward movement. You get trunk rotation. It's really not that much different when you hear hitting coaches talking about a hitter coming here and having trunk rotation before anything else happens, so that the arms are trailing what their upper body is doing. So it's really technically the same thing from here. Another very, very common problem that you'll see with this for young ladies is on that over the top, they tend to come out, or their elbows get out from their body so that they're snapping this way, back, pulling back into their body, as opposed to wrist snap. The wrist snap happens and the shoulder and the body follow afterwards. Those are the biggest problems. Now, once you start talking about a drop ball that hangs, first thing I'm going to tell you to do is go check the stride. Is it too long, or is their body angle not on top of their toes, or is their ball out in front of that release box? Those are the biggest problems. Now let's put that over the top draw all back right together so that you can actually see what it looks like without me releasing the ball. I come in, I'm nice and relaxed as I go through my body motion or my arm motion. I'm getting my angle over my toes. I'm coming right to my snap, and it's smack over the top. Everything's right through there. So that puts that all back together. It gives you two different kinds of drop balls to work with. I tell you to play with both of them, work on both of them, and master both of them, because it gives you more pitches to repertoire, gives you more pitches that break planes, and we've already agreed, even the hitting coaches, that that's what picks up and makes batters failures. All right, let's take this drop ball one step farther, whether it's a peel or over top or snap over drop ball. Let's take it to the next level. Remember, we talked about that power line several times now. If I drive out and I'm on that power line and I get my body angle over for that drop ball, I'm going to throw a drop ball that should go right down through the middle of that plate. But let's start mastering it on an inside or an outside. I'm a right-handed pitcher to a right-handed batter, and I want that outside drop. If my normal stride is right there on the power line, I'm going to move it 1 to 3 inches off to the left, okay, if I'm right-handed, to be able to adjust it and come through. Nothing, let me repeat again, nothing changes with the wrist snap, the body angle. It only changes where you step. Therefore, if I want an inside one, it's the same thing here. Okay, I'm 1 to 3 inches right off that power line through there to the opposite side. Okay, real important to remember when you're learning that snap over drop and you start to take it outside. The biggest thing you don't want to see is, I don't want to see trunk rotation taking. I want to see wrist snap, and everything stays the same and follows where your power line is. Real important to note that power line really hasn't changed. You've just stepped and made your power line another straight line about a 1 to 3 inch off from the original power line you had stepped up or set up from your original step. Okay, one last trick. Remember, we talked about a batter. The biggest thing we want to confuse them about is where they're going to hit it, location, inside, outside, up or down, is what we've covered in this tape. Now let's just throw in one more element of surprise, and let's talk about the off-speed drop ball. Very hard to throw an off-speed rise ball, and most off-speed rise balls I've seen have gone over a 200-foot fence, so we don't want those. We want off-speed drop balls. Best thing, and the only thing that I'm going to tell you I change, is I use the same rollover drop. I don't try to change anything with my body other than I make my legs feel as if I've pitched 8, 9, 10 games. And for most softball pitchers, if you're working on it hard and you're pretty good, you know what that feels like. They're dead. They just weigh like leads, and nothing changes with anything else. Now, my stride obviously is going to be much shorter, and it's going to look very short possibly from the hitter, but they won't realize it until it's on them and hitting them unless they studied you. And what you do is your legs are dead, and as I come out, they really just don't stride. And everything I'm throwing is with my wrist snap to get that ball to go that 40 to 43 feet. I'm wanting that off-speed drop ball to maybe cross somewhere below the knees, mid-shin, and bounce right behind the plate so that it's an off-speed pitch. Best thing about this pitch is it's a form of a changeup, but it actually also has some pretty good movement on it. And if you miss, you really should tend to miss low. And if a batter can hit a ball that bounces off the ground for a base hit, they deserve that credit, and we'll give that to them. So play with that. You can work on different speeds. You could have a 40 or 50% off-speed drop ball. You could have a 20. You can work with it a whole bunch. And the best thing about it is it throws in one more factor. Now we're changing planes, but we're also changing speed. This is the same drill that we use for the rice ball and isolating the lower part of the body, getting the legs out of the whole situation. It's for the peel drop, getting them to feel that ball actually pull off the ball or the fingertips with a good wrist snap right down around the hip. You don't have to worry about location with this. You're just really working on a good, sharp, clean, crisp wrist snap for the peel drop. On this ball, we have a black piece of electrical tape that just winds around where the horseshoe is for the correct grip on a drop ball, whether you're using that peel drop or the over-the-top drop like we showed earlier in the video. And what this does is allows the girl to have a visual, actual sight on the ball that shows the correct rotation. If they're getting a sideways rotation on that ball, you'll start to see that line wobble. If they get a straight rotation on it, they'll get a nice tight seam rotation and see nothing but a black dot going around. Obviously, you can use this for either a rise ball or any other kind of pitch you're learning. You just would have to move that electrical tape, but it's an easy way for two pitchers to work together side by side, not putting a lot of strain on their arm and working on the correct rotation for the ball on a peel drop or an over the top drop. Either one that they would be using, they could do that with this drill. Just like we isolated the lower half of the pitcher's bodies out of it so they could concentrate strictly on wrist snap, what we've done here is actually put them into the correct body angle that we want them to have in release of the ball. Remember, the chest is over the toes so that they do have that angle or a shorter stride, and they're working on getting their wrist snap to feel what it would feel like to have their body in the correct angle or over the top of the ball like we would want on a drop ball. Notice their wrist snap is coming down sharp and hard right around their leg to get the maximum amount of rotation, which gives us the best movement. In closing, I really want to emphasize how important it is if you're the one learning how to pitch or you're teaching someone how to pitch, that learning new pitches takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, persistence, and determination. Everything that we're doing in mastering this art and learning new pitches, we want to try different philosophies, different grips, different thoughts and ideas, and even come up with some of your own. You're really trying to find what best works for you and how you can help confuse that batter. You want to make sure that you remember that each pitch starts with you, and we want to make each pitch end with us. We're in it to try to confuse the batter because they're identifying two things: where the ball is in location and when it's going to get there. Have fun doing that, and remember, the hardest pitch to hit is one that changes planes, and we're mastering two. Balls that look like strikes so we get the calls, and strikes that look like balls so the batters don't swing.